Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and I want to see if you can hear me out there. Please let me know in the comments because I'm always I might be Gen X, but I'm always a boomer at computers. So please tell me if it's working. And let's see if there's anyone actually in here. So what have we got here? What are our... oh, loud and clear, says North of the Rockies. Okay. I'm trying to, just a sec, guys. I'm trying to sort this out. We're going to give a little bit of time for people anyways to get onto the live stream, because I don't have any fancy intros like Diversity and Dragons has or anybody else, So let's just see. Okay, I hadn't realized when I prepared this live stream episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter that we were going to be competing with the Super Bowl, because if you're not American, you kind of end up forgetting that kind of thing. So we're going to see how many actual viewers we're having now, but I'm hoping that we're going to get a few people in here. And I still can't find where StreamYard gives me my stats here on how many people are present. Well, that's not it. All right, well, that's all right. I can peek into the... All right, well, we've got about 7 people right now. That's quite low for the first minute of the show, but we'll see. We'll see if some more people straggle in. Anybody have an idea when the Super Bowl game ends? Because we started an hour earlier this time compared to previous times, because our guest, that was his preferred timing, and I thought, okay, yeah, there's not a problem, but so I don't know. It doesn't really matter though, because I'm sure that anyone who chooses the Super Bowl over my show is probably going to catch up later on. So a few notes before we begin, while we're waiting to see if we get a few stragglers coming in here. First off, I wanted to say that today our guest is Rob Alderman, who is from Pulp Comic Press, and he is the creator of the Gods of the Forbidden North trilogy, and we're going to have some questions for him. And of course, as always, people in the comments can present their own questions here. I don't do this thing that a lot of other YouTube people do, where you must do a super chat to have me read your comment. Of course, I'm very grateful to everybody who does make super chats. This live stream, while it's live, is not being monetized, so it doesn't annoy people. So if you can, then feel free to throw in a super chat or two there. That'll go to Domino's Kitten Fund. I don't know where she is. I think she's downstairs right now. But yeah, tomorrow, by the way, is Domino's 3rd month birthday. She turns 3 months tomorrow. So and at this age, cats, they gotta get a vaccine every couple of weeks, and they got to get dewormed, and you got to get them kitten toys and all sorts of nonsense, but like not gratuitous ones, but ones that'll because especially if you have a single cat, it needs to have a little bit of entertainment. So it's all well within what I can afford, but if you want to help out, I would be very grateful, and I'm sure Domino would be too. And I'm sure she's going to show up here anytime now, because she usually spends most of her time when I'm on the computer desk here. She's like right next to me. But I think she went downstairs to get some food. So before we start, while we're waiting for a few more people to come in, I wanted to mention that my latest products, 101 Sarmatians, the source book for Baptism of Fire. I'd show you 101 Sarmatians, but I don't have it yet, right? So here's this is Baptism of Fire, gold bestseller on drive-through. Hugely successful game. And 101 Sarmatians is the source book for it, the first larger source book. There's some Pundit Files issues that are for Baptism of Fire too, but this the first big one. It's a 100-page source book about noblemen and the different noble clans of Poland at the time of the Piasts, and lots of stuff on intrigues and politics and courtly activities. And like the title says, there's 101 NPC profiles there for you to put into your campaign, and an appendix on the veneration of saints, where you can figure out how you can have your character be particularly devoted to one of the saints. And of course, in that chapter, there is a listing of the saints that were the best known saints in Poland, the ones that were most venerated in Poland at that time in the 11th century. And so if your character is a devotee of one of these saints, they can pray for the intercession of those saints in their particular patronages. So that's an interesting mechanic, especially if you want to emphasize the Christian elements of Baptism of Fire. Also, we've got the Pundit Files, and the latest issue of the Pundit Files is also related to Baptism of Fire. It's an adventure called The Bones of St.Florian. It's tied into the whole idea of the veneration of saints, and it has an epic kind of quest for the player characters to go in search of the missing relics, the missing bones of a Roman martyred saint, based on a vision given to them by a holy man. And they'll have to go through all kinds of dangers, traveling through the Wilderlands, facing pagans, witches, dangerous creatures, and Slovakians to try to get to the bones of St. Florian. So it's a pretty good adventure. It's based on an adventure I ran in my campaign that came up with in my campaign. And so be sure to check it out. You can get that, the Pundit Files 27, I think it is, on the Red Room, only at the Red Room store. The Red Room is a great web store of indie, mostly OSR gaming. You'll find a lot of other cool stuff there, and you can get that one or any other issue of the Pundit Files for just $3.50. So if you can get $3.50, you can get an issue of the Pundit Files. And now I guess I should point out that my other special guest has arrived. Here's Domino. Domino, thank you for showing up for the camera there, Kitty. I know it's not your favorite thing to do there. All right. So remember, if you give us a super chat, that's going straight into Domino's pet food and other miscellaneous accounts. All right. So it is, what are we at now? 10. Well, we'll give another couple of minutes for people to show up. I appreciate the people who are here, though I'm guessing it's not that you've sacrificed the Super Bowl, but rather you're not that interested in the Super Bowl, because I pretty much doubt that anybody who's like a serious fan is going to like say no to the Super Bowl to come watch the Pundit, but still. We're now at 22 people, which is still very low typically for one of my episodes. Like but sometimes people are slow to come in, and then like I look, in an hour we might have 100. Who knows? So yeah, we'll be talking about a number of things tonight, but of course mainly about the incredible Gods of the Forbidden North. If you guys aren't acquainted with it, well, Rob. Oh, hey, we've got there a $10 super chat already for Domino's Toy Fund. All right, I will be sure to get her, because she needs some more toys she can bite and chew on, because otherwise she'll just bite and chew on everything, mainly my hand and other, my legs and stuff. So it'll probably be good to get her some kind of thing that she can do with that. So thank you very much, North of the Rockies. All right, so Gods of the Forbidden North is this is volume 1, and we're going to ask Rob in a second here, but I think it's actually the shortest of the 3 books. And it is the first part of an epic campaign series, all of which have sold very, very well on Kickstarter. We're going to talk to him about that. We're going to talk to him about some other things about, you know, the hobby, and hopefully it'll be a very interesting conversation. All right, so we're about 10 minutes in, so Rob, you can unmute yourself if you want. I don't know if you're still muted or not, but you can come on live. And we're going to begin. It traditionally, I don't know if you've ever seen an episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter, but there's always the first question I ask all my guests is the same question. So, you know, it's been a few years now that I think was Forbidden North, was that 3 years ago that you started it, or that you did the Kickstarter for it?
Yeah, the Kickstarter would be 2022, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, so like 3 years, and you've done a lot of stuff in that time. And so the first question is, who in the hobby has been good to you, and who in the hobby has been bad to you?
Oh wow, I would say I've been pretty fortunate. I've had a lot of people good to me. I would say first my backers. I guess, you know, like they've been really, really supportive, and I've really appreciated. A lot of them have given me advice. You know, like you know how it is, pundit. Like it's you're a writer. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Trying to do all this other stuff. And I've had them pull me aside, and some of them know what they're doing, and they'll point me in the right direction. Some of them are, you know, actually with other gaming companies, and you know they noticed me for whatever reason, and you know they've reached out and seen I've been dealing with a problem or whatnot, and have given me a lot of advice. A guy named Lance at Gray Fox Games has given me a ton of really useful advice. But I mean, he's not the only one. I've had a lot of people give me some help. You know, Matt Finch took my phone call once, and we had a long conversation, and really enjoyed talking to him. And I got to meet him at North Texas RPG Con. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, the list is pretty big and extensive. But I mean, I've really honestly, like I've had a really good experience so far in the OSR and with the other creators, and even those who aren't like Lance is at more of a board game type place, you know, so like not quite in I guess in the OSR sphere, but I mean, like still everyone's been really, really helpful. I don't think I've really come across anyone that's caused a problem for me in a way that I would even care to mention. Like, you know, like it would be minor. Yeah. So
you're sure, right? Because this is the RPG Pundit show. So like everybody knows that if you're on here, you can talk shit about someone, you know. So this is a golden opportunity for you. But if you don't want to take it, you don't have to, you know.
No, I really don't have much to. I don't really have much to say. I mean, most of the people I've ever that have taken shots at me or just criticized the books. But I'm like I told you, kind of last time we spoke, I went to a grad school, so like that's all they do. You kind of start to get used to it. And if it beats you up, you keep it quiet, and then you just move on, you know, like and learn from it. Hopefully, I guess I just haven't had that experience yet where someone's tried to really screw you. If I want to take shots at somebody, I don't know. I don't know if I should do this because he's a lawyer. I had a lawyer who was supposed to be handling my, you know, like the trademarking of my logo, and I don't want to name him, but he, I don't know if he really like screwed me intentionally. Some people that I've told the story to think that he may have pulled a fast one on me, but I don't really know what his intent was. It could have been the way he said it was, but you know, he basically like took my money, about $3,000, you know, and we went and we went through this long process. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You know, trying to trademark something takes a while, and you know, you get to the end of the trademark process, and then their lawyer comes in, the federal government or whoever lawyer comes in, who's in like Hawaii or something, and she's you put the wrong check. Not instead of like RPG game, you're supposed to put RPG supplement, and like made us start all over. And then he's like, oh, by the way, I have to go to a different firm. And I was like, I just basically paid him for nothing. So that's the worst that happened to me, I guess. But I think he was telling the truth. Like, I think it was just but some of my backers like, hey, screwed you. I try to look at the good in it, but
yeah, like, well, what has, okay, so what's the most, this is not one of my listed questions, but sometimes people's answers give me additional side questions here. So what do you think was the most unreasonable criticism from a backer that you ever got?
I don't know if it was from a backer. It was like I saw it a couple times, like online in forums and such.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't. I don't know who did it, but the criticism was that I think it was like about the number of players in the game, and it was like, because I think when I put there like 6 to 8 characters, and I think my first draft was 7 characters, and I changed it because people were attacking me over that. So I was like, oh, if you put the line in between 2 numbers, everyone gets cool about it. But then they kept like making a big deal about 6 to 8 characters, and I was kind of like, finally, I was like, I had to like put on DriveThruRPG under there, like, well, sorry, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Like, did they think that was like too many characters, like that it was too big a party, or what was the
right? No, they were like, whoever gets a group that big, and like that was the comment. And I was like, it actually says it in old school Essentials rules. Like if you flip to the game, I'm blanking on the chapter right now, but it's in the game, and I had the rules tomb, and it's in there. It says this game is designed for 6 to 8 characters. Now that could be hirelings, I assume. It doesn't have to necessarily be players,
True.
but it says that. So I was just kind of like, well, I guess they don't know that, but like that. I'm just obviously, you know what I'm talking about. You design something for us.
I get that there are some groups, like,
yeah,
you might have anything from 3 to more players, right, in any gaming group, but 6 is not an unusual amount of players, right? Like, I mean, in my campaigns, 2 of my 3 current campaigns have 6 and higher numbers of players, right? Like my Sword and Caravan campaign has 6, and my DCC campaign has 7. So it's that's not that weird. So yeah, I think that sounds a bit unreasonable. And also, like as you said, right? Like if you've got a group of 4 people, well, just add 4 NPCs, or something like that, right? Okay, and so what do you think was the most reasonable criticism you ever got from any of your books?
Oh, sure, there's lots. I thought
was there one though that made you really think and want to, or possibly actually change something?
Yeah. No, I think one of the ones that really stuck with me. There were a few, but I think one of the ones is probably a lot of criticism on the opening adventure, my opening quest. I got a lot about that. Like, as I tried to do Skyrim opening, and the thing is like I used when I played.
Yeah, well, you mean that chapter where you step by step create the character as they're traveling to the port? Yeah, that's in volume 1. You sent me volume 1. I reviewed it, and I didn't care much for that either, frankly. But I guess it was an interesting choice. But yeah,
that's polite.
A lot of people said, that's okay.
No,
I guess that makes sense.
Well, so like I guess when I play tested it, I had buy-in from the players, and they all had their own copy of the rules. And so what I found is that if that is the case, it works great.
Yeah.
Because what happens is everyone show up. We're gonna make our guys together, and we're gonna go step by step together. Everyone has a copy of the book, so no one's sitting around waiting. And that's what I should have said. I guess that's the first thing I thought. I should have said this will only work if this is what happens. But because I noticed that when you don't have those 2 qualities, then it does kind of break down. It doesn't work out so well. But and it turns into like just. But if you think about it, like if you're all sitting around, you're doing it step by step. Everyone does it at the same time, and they've bought into this idea, and they all have a book. And what happens is like they all finish up around the same time. They take a little quick mental break while you kind of paraphrase or read exactly what the next little block is. And then you all go back to it, and you're getting a little piece of information. And it worked great when I did it, the few times I did it with my group, but I had buy-in. And they all had books. But then there was this time where I did it where the group did not have the books. they had the buy-in, but not the books. And what happened is one guy starts going ahead of everybody. You know, that one guy was not the buy-in. I guess I should say. And then the others, 2 players had no book. And what happened is there was a lot of sitting around while some were doing their thing. And then I was like, okay, we're gonna scrap this. And here's your pre-gens. Let's do this. But like, so I guess it only works. So I guess now if I redo it, and I probably will for sure one day. I've even thought about adding it depending if there's room in the appendix of the 3rd book, like as other alternative or, you know, openings. I'd probably just be like, you start in the tavern and you're all in your room and you've just arrived and you got this amulet and something.
No, that's the more classic version. Yeah.
There you go. You know, or something else, you know, shipwreck or something like that. I don't know.
So you've done, at this point, we can say, even though one of them is still going on right now, you are doing the Gods of the Forbidden North trilogy Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It was you had wanted to raise $40,000. You are currently at about $110,000, and there's 24 days to go. So a tremendous success, in other words. And I believe all 3 of your Kickstarters were fairly good successes, right? So how does it feel to be a Kickstarter superstar?
I don't feel that way because I'm sure, you know, like I haven't really made any money. So it's just like, oh, that's nice, you know, like, but I don't know. I'm just excited people really like the world and they've got the support. And, you know, like the reason this was so successful is because so many of my previous backers bought in on that first day and I told them what I wanted them to do and they just helped. And that's, you know, you can't do this alone. And, you know, I think we got to like 82 or 88,000 that first, I can't remember, but it was like a lot. And it was like, wow, you know, that we were almost to 100 and that's because of them. So, you know, it's just exciting. You know, I'm sure you know what I mean when you get like everyone praising you for baptism and, you know, it's a great book.
Now, I've never done a Kickstarter though. I've always gone with like just directly to print on demand. And that's always worked for me. But part of that is because I've seen some of the challenges that are involved in doing Kickstarters. And you just said that you've never really made any money, right? So I hope you made at least a little bit of money, right? But that's one of the things people don't get about Kickstarter is that, you know, even though I've never done one myself, I've looked at the phenomenon pretty closely, and there's a lot of Kickstarters that generate a lot of money in the sense of the number of pledges and what have you, but that when you add in like the additional bonuses that you're going to do when you get to a certain funding level, you have to pay for those too, and everything has its expenses, so that it actually becomes a very challenging thing. And there are people who have raised, you know, $1 million in a Kickstarter project and then gone broke because of it, you know, because of the actual cost ended up being, I don't know, $1,100,000, you know, and suddenly they're $100,000 in the hole for this Kickstarter that looked super successful, right? So have you gotten like what your first one? That was the first. Without the Gods of Forbidden North Volume 1 was your first Kickstarter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so have you learned over time? Like, are you doing some things differently in the next? Have you done things differently in the next 2 that are going to help you in the kind of business end of the Kickstarter?
Well, so yes and no, because unfortunately, and this is because of the 3-part nature of the books, I sort of locked myself into certain choices that you can't back out of, like, you know, like production value. You can't have, you know what I mean? You can't have the first book like have 200 really great pieces of art, and then the second one have 4. You know, so like you kind of had to keep the same. So I tried to trim a little bit, but I was like, can't really trim that much. So like that would be like the first thing I'd do, you know, like, and obviously I've learned, like when I first did it, I did drive-through RPG, like what you're talking about, print on demand. It was that or PDF, basically, soft or hardcover. But then the second time I was like, let me add the logistics factor of an offset. And that was a learning experience this time. So that was, I took some lumps on that one because like some logistics you think out ahead of time. You're like, okay, I got this. There's other things you think they're so small and they turn into $7,000 that
very tricky.
Yeah, and like my early bird maps, I took a hit on that for sure. I lost a lot of money, but I got to hang in there and do it. So, in that sense, I couldn't change certain things, but there were other things I certainly did. Like this time around, I understood. Okay, now I know how to package everything together, and I know how to get one company, and it's always better to use one. Cut down the number of companies you have to talk to if you can. Sometimes it might cost a little bit more per book or whatever, but it's worth it. I've found, because I'm just one person for most of the journey, it's kind of the way to go. So like little things like that. And obviously next time, like after this is over, I will know exactly how to keep things way more simple. Because right now, like I had like, was it 7 or 8 or 9 pledge tiers? Like I'm gonna have like 3 going forward. That's it. And like add
a good idea,
yeah.
Well, it's actually, the success tends to be what like really screws up a lot of people who do Kickstarters, right? Like if your goal is, let's say, $20,000, right, and you get 25,000, then you're probably going to be pretty good, right? But as soon as you're like, if you're aiming for 20,000 and you get 200,000, suddenly there's going to be a lot of problems depending on how you've tiered the bonus, benefits that you're going to get at different levels. So you sent me a review copy of Gods of the Forbidden North Volume 1. The video of this book is in my. You can go to the reviews playlist. Anybody on the audience, not right now, but hopefully after the live stream, and you can check out my review of Gods of the Forbidden North Volume 1. It's very interesting because it's got elements of a. It's clearly got like an adventure path type adventure, but then it also has an open sandbox element to it. So it does kind of both worlds. And this book is 471 pages long, as compared to Baptism of Fire, which is 374 pages. So it's 375. So it's bigger than Baptism of Fire. And is volume? Am I right? Is volume 2 bigger than volume 1?
Yeah, it's 530.
And is volume 3 bigger than volume 2?
So I'm telling everyone 400 pages, but
okay,
that's just because I want to surprise them when it's probably more, just like I did the last 2 times. I'm only going to give 300 pages. Here's your 700 pages. No.
Is volume 3 like big enough to kill a man potentially? And it's like that.
Pretty close to that. Yeah, it's
all right.
I remember when I got volume 2. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I hope at some point you send me 2 and 3 to review as well, but no pressure.
No, I've got I was actually gonna ask you before the show and I didn't get a chance. But I was gonna say, like, I'm getting my premium copies, the offset ones, through my fulfillment team. I think in like 3 days, according to what she told me, delivered to the New Jersey warehouse. So I'm gonna have like 200 something extra copies of each. So if you'd like one, and this is the premium one, so it's nice. I'll probably send you some if you want. Just afterward we
sure. That's great. We'll be in touch, and I'll of course do a review video.
That'd be great. Thanks, man.
That's good. So what's volume 3 about, and what are the highlights of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short, but like the volume 1's about the wilderness, volume 2 is the underworld underneath it, volume 3 is this one hex that I've avoided, and that's the castle, which is the big sort of mega dungeon of the bad guy, and everything straight down through the underworld all the way to the last level, if you want to call it that. So that's the short answer, but it's basically one giant high level mega dungeon. It's all designed for 9th level plus characters, which is always hard. But I challenged myself. I told myself, nope, you're going to do a high level. I don't care what anyone says. You're going to make it high level. You're going to make it fun, and you're going to make it zany and crazy, but also like serious. I don't mean like Gonzo, like just a lot of stuff going crazy and kind of chaotic, if you want to use that term. And so I guess, I've got I think there's like 6 million, gold pieces and monster experience combined, like, because the first 2 together had about 4.5 or something like that, and I've basically got like 10.5 million throughout all 3 volumes. So I know it's got a lot of treasure and monster XP, especially treasure, scattered all throughout it. And this is sort of like the draw of the whole thing. All the adventures are showing up to this continent because they've heard that there's this castle and all of his treasures there for the taking. And that's like the local lord saying, we don't want to send our army in there to mess with anything. We'll send these dumbass adventurers out there, and then we'll tax them when they come back, and we'll get it that way. So, it's sort of supposed to be the idea, but I hadn't given my fans, backers, the dungeon yet. So, and it's not the world's biggest dungeon or anything, but it's, you know, it's like 637 rooms right now, and then there's a whole.
That's certainly in mega dungeon territory, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess depending on your definition, it's pushing the boundary of dungeon or in the mega dungeon turf. But I would call it a mega dungeon based on my own definition. But I think it's gonna be fun. It's very large. It's big sprawling levels too. There's not like a ton of levels. There's like maybe like 6 levels total, but each one's really, really large, 100, 200 room, you know, something like that.
Yeah, that would be big. Yeah.
But
so we got a super chat here from Sadwings Raging, $10. Thank you for all you do for the hobby pundit. Well, thank you, Sadwings. I really appreciate all of my fans and the positive feedback I get from them, which is nice because, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and the ratio of positive feedback has grown over the years. You know, like at the beginning, it was more about me being like a figure of infamy in the hobby, you know, and people who there are a lot of people who like me that would write to me in secret, telling them, I mean, I totally agree with you, Pundit, right? But back then they weren't allowed to say it in public, right? Now this is very nice. So Sadwings, thanks for those $10. It'll go, as I've said at the beginning of the live stream, all the any of the super chats, which I really appreciate it because we're not monetizing the live stream at the moment. Is going to go to the Domino Fund because she needs to get all of her shots and her deworming and her cat toys and everything else. So thank you for that, Sadwings. So is this the third volume? Is this the definite end of the Forbidden North for you?
Well, with this place, yeah. The world itself, probably not. But the next product would probably be 1 book, not 3. And if I go in this direction, this is one of my options in the future.
Will this be like the setting book of your whole game world?
It would just probably be another mega adventure, just 1 book this time though, just because I'm not going to do a trilogy, and it would be a different continent. So I'll like Skyrim it, you know, more Elder, like, you know, just I don't know if you know like Elder Scrolls, but like every time they do a new game in that setting, it's a new continent. So I was like, I thought of that idea and I was like, that'd be pretty cool. You could like, if you do a gameable content type product that's also giving you setting info, just like mine does, you could kind of develop the world one sort of like location at a time, region, whatever. And over time you could kind of flesh it out. And I thought that would be pretty cool to kind of build this big line of huge sandboxes with dungeons and stuff. And, you know, you could eventually connect them all, you know, like sail to one to the other. And that's cool. I thought that'd be kind of neat. So
yeah. I'm not really familiar with Eldritch Squirrels. I presume that's a video game. I don't play video games, but they're I think I know the gist of what you're saying anyways.
Yeah. Each of their video games, like Morrowind's like 1 continent, and then the next one, Skyrim, that was really big, was Skyrim, another you know.
I know the names. I've heard the names all over the place. Obviously. I've just never played any of them.
Right. Okay.
So you won an Ennie for which volume was that you won the Ennie for?
I got a judge's spotlight award, like a minor Ennie, like an Ennie nod, from the for volume 1.
Okay.
But it's an Ennie, so I'll say how many awards. That's not one of the main categories.
Hang on now, because my follow-up question is, how did that even happen? And do you feel ashamed of winning an Ennie?
No. Actually, it really meant a lot to me. I did not expect it at all.
Well, it's very weird for people these days to win Ennies that aren't winning it for ideological reasons, you know. And
I was surprised.
The last. Geez, I'm sure that there are some other OSR products that have won, but usually like they have to have some kind of carryover success, or they have to be people that are very into the woke crowd. the last person I remember that like got an Emmy that surprised me was Zach Smith when he won for, I think it was Red and Pleasant Land or something like that. Because of course, you know, there were people that protested that he had been given an Emmy. Yeah, I don't know. I've never been one for any of the awards, but the Emmys in particular always seem to be very like that there's like this in group, and so I don't know if you're in with the in group, or if it's that somehow you slipped through by some kind of weird series of events, you know, and maybe you don't know either, but
I mean, I'll be honest, I of course knew of the Emmys, but I didn't follow them.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, I just didn't follow them very much. Like occasionally you'd see something like someone won an Emmy, and I knew that was okay, that's like the Oscar or whatever of the industry, from what I understand.
Just to clear something up here, you didn't pay anyone off, right? because I mean, I say it, but you know, like one has to kind of ask, because there were a number of like really weird Emmy scandals over the years that the Emmys have been going on, right? There have been people that apparently took some kind of bribes, and people that you know did some kind of weird stuff, judges that were up to no good, and all sorts of things like that, right? So
I mean, like I said, I've never heard of any of that stuff, so I didn't know any of that. I did not expect to win that. Someone mentioned to me, one of my backers said, "Hey, you should put your thing in for the Emmys, or I'll do it for you," or something like that. This was like a few years ago. Like what? Well, I guess it was. Well, we'll see. The submission was a long time before I won, so this was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I'm starting to like kind of blank out. But somebody mentioned it to me, and then they said, because you either can submit your own or someone can submit it for you.
Yeah. You have to submit for the Emmys. Yeah. And I mean, you have to send a copy to all the judges and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So either someone submitted it for me, or they convinced me to submit it when they pushed on me, and okay. and then what happened was I forgot about it. I didn't think about it. I didn't even know when the Emmys were. You know, I didn't think any of that. I didn't know what even the different award levels were. I just knew there were Emmys. You know, like I don't watch the Oscars. I don't watch the Grammys. I don't watch the Emmys. You know, I just didn't pay attention to it. It just wasn't on my radar. Nothing against it, or I don't know anything about it. I just didn't know anything about it.
Well, maybe they're trying to change their tune as well now. Who knows? Because there's a lot of these things that at one point had been like ideologically captured that are now like trying to. I mean, Meta is trying to say they're for free speech now, right? So like, who knows? But like, actually, now that I think about it, that last year was last. Yeah, I would say it was last year. Shadowdark won a bunch of Emmys, right? And Shadowdark is an OSR related game. It was a big success, just like yours was. Well, it was a bigger success than yours, to be honest. But it's
a lot more.
Yeah. But you know, like but you can kind of see why that was, right? Because Shadowdark catered to the 5e crowd, and the writer is a lesbian, and you're like, so there's all kinds of reasons why it could have been, you know, acceptable to those judges. But a guy like you, I mean, I know that you don't get involved. I've never seen you get involved in any kind of like political aspects of the hobby or anything like that. But that's silence is violence to them, right? Like they assume anyone who isn't actively ideologically motivated is probably on the other side, you know, and you know, that's usually probably a pretty likely suggestion, because if you're on their side, you know, you're going to be one of the screaming hysterical masses, you know. But so it really did take me by surprise when you won that Emmy. But it's good. I mean, like, because there are a lot of people who don't know any of that, but they know like it's an award, right? Like it's like my publisher for Baptism of Fire, when Baptism, like I've got a number, like I've got a bunch of gold bestsellers on drive-through from all my different publishers, but the Baptism of Fire publisher put like this on the like on any of the images that he uses for social media purposes, he puts this big like gold seal of the, you know, gold bestseller on drive-through RPG, right? Which I never bothered to do, but he does, and I'm sure that you know, people see that and go, oh, it's a bestseller, right? So I'm going to buy more. So I'm sure you did get some sales from the fact that you were any award winning.
I mean, I literally got an email one day. It was from this lady, and I never heard of her before, and I didn't pay attention to it at first because you get a lot of emails, and I'm just kind of like, oh, I'll get to that one later. It was one of the, I come up and she's like, I just want to let you know you want an edit. I was like, wait, what? Wait, this is a joke, right? Like, I was like, this gotta be a joke. How did I win an Emmy? Like, I'm not anybody. I at the time, I think I had just gotten my second Kickstarter done, which had just broken 100. Like at the end, like I got a little over it, and I was like, oh no way, this can't be true. Like I did just so many better products out there, but there it was, and it was this really short, sweet email, and I kind of caught back, like almost kind of blown away, and it actually. It didn't mean anything to me at first because I just sort of went, oh, and then I couldn't go because they told me like 2 weeks before the ceremony, because I was like, oh, I'll have to go to that. And then what happened was I looked and all the hotels were like $8 billion a night. I was like,
I'm pretty sure that it's still at Gen Con, isn't it? The
in Indianapolis. Yeah. So like I looked to go. I was like, oh, I should go to that. And it was so expensive. I was like, it's not worth it. I just isn't worth it now. Unfortunately, I wanted to go. So I was like, well, they let you film a video and submit it in. I was like, well, okay, I'll do that, I guess. So that's what I did. Didn't think anything of it. Just was like, oh, that's cool. I can use it as a marketing tool. Thank you. That's cool. And then I got the medal, and I got the little folder thing with the certificate, and that was different. When I got the medal, and they also give you a little bag of really nice, like these purple dice that are like almost see through, like a universe with these gold flecks, and it's really nice dice. And I have to find them because I think my 5-year-old son took them and started playing with them. I'm like, no, any dice. But I got them, and that actually was really moving when you actually got the medal, and it was like real. And then I was like, oh, it felt like you were being acknowledged by peers and greater colleagues, and you do that in academia. I'm a professor, so I guess to go back to your like staying out of it politics thing, like I teach my students. I'd always tell them, like at the beginning of my college classes, that I'm trying to, I'm not here to tell them what to think or anything. I'm just teaching them how to do argument or whatever the class is. And
what's your field again? I know you told me the last time we spoke, but I've forgotten now.
No, it's okay. I was creative writer technically by degree, terminal degree, but I teach all kinds of writing classes. I'm teaching game writing right now at the university, and I'm teaching like tech writing, business writing, and whatever they're all kind of similar in some ways. But I always tell my students, like especially when it comes to the first year writing that I teach, and these are the types that are like essays that usually have like a political topic, like a presidential running election issue is often a topic. I try to tell them, look, I'm not going to be grading you based on your opinion. I'm going to be grading you based on the how strong your argument is, and was it well constructed. And I always tell them, like, if I get a paper and I ideologically, privately, I disagree with it, but it's like really sound and follows the structure that I've explained to you, I'll pass you. And there have been some I've done that for, and there's some that I totally agree with on a private level, and I fail them because they didn't do what I told them.
That is the correct procedure. Yeah. So we're up to about 40 people now, which is quite good. And so I wanted to mention to everybody, we're currently speaking with Rob Alderman, who is the creator of the Gods of the Forbidden North, a massive adventure campaign book, series of trilogy of books, actually. And if you hit the description button and expand it, you'll see a link there to his current Kickstarter, and you'll also see a link to all of my various products, so you can check all of those out if you're new here. And please hit the like button. And if this live stream at the moment is not monetized, so anyone who wants to give a super chat is very welcome to do so. Super chat money is going to the Domino Kitten Fund. We've got a comment here for you. I don't know if you saw that or not, but Flint says, Rob, Odysseus here. I want to chat with you about an interview later. Frank Destroso says, the fact that Baptism of Fire didn't win awards is criminal. Well, as I pointed out, Frank, I appreciate that, but there isn't really a single awards awards body in the tabletop RPG scene that I think is actually like honestly worth winning. No offense, Rob, right? But they're all either in crowd rewards for people who think like the judges or the people in charge of the ceremony, or they are these kind of popularity contests, right? And you know, it's nice to have to say, oh, I won an award, because you can get some, you know, some additional sales. But you know, I never submit any of my products for awards. I don't think any of my publishers ever have either, because I don't publish myself. I just, you know, if any of my publishers ever want to submit one, I guess they could, but I would never like request it. So, you know, to me, the rewards that matter are like the bestseller tiers that you get on drive-thru, right? Because that's just pure capitalism. That is sales, right? And that means that a large number of people have enjoyed the product and are buying the product. And you know, like also the best rewards that I've ever gotten are the, you know, the ratings and reviews that people put on the drive-through page, right? So like the fact that most of my games have very high ratings is I think like the best. The people I want to be rewarded by are my customers. You know, that's the main, not by some kind of like supposed RPG hobby intelligentsia or glitterati. Flint also says, I was banned from Reddit for defending Rob and stating he was just in it for the gaming and want to have fun rolling dice and killing orcs. So I guess that my point is correct. There are some people that interpret the fact that you are apolitical to mean that you are not on their side. You know?
I wonder what he was defending, like you know, defending me from.
Maybe he'll say, he'll tell you later or something, or tell us later. Samuel Wright says Shadowdark's the best game played in years. Its awards were well deserved. But look, Shadowdark is a perfectly fine game. I wasn't suggesting that it's badly designed. I mean, I can't really suggest it's badly designed because so many of their special OSR mechanics in there are also in my games. You know, so I obviously I think they're pretty good. Right? Like you know, I used to have like the only major games that had characters. When you level up in any of my games, in Baptism of Fire, Lion and Dragon, Star Adventure, instead of getting fixed bonuses when you level, you roll on a table to see which benefits you get that level. And for the longest time, I was the main guy who did that. And then now Shadowdark has that too, right? And that's a really good mechanic. I'm not blaming Shadowdark for using it. On the contrary, that's part of the OSR philosophy, is that you want to put in new ideas, and for other people, and if other people use those new ideas, it also ends up, you know, improving the whole OSR genre, right? So that's like, all that is great. You know, I was just saying that the reason I suspect that if Shadowdark had been written by a heterosexual white man, you know, a cis-het white man, instead of a lesbian woman, it might not have gotten the award, right? Because the fact is, the judges of the Ennies do often put ideological elements into their equation, right? Like especially diversity elements, you know. Which is not to say that we think that they mistook Rob for a lesbian or anything like that, but Flint said,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. All right. Well, Flint said the regular Eddie crowd is intimidated by the intellectual acumen in Pundit's work and by the sheer girth of Rob's campaign. Well, I mean, to be fair, that's not true, because they gave Rob the award, and you know, definitely his books are full of girth, you know, and full of content. So, like I said, I'm willing to believe that maybe there is some culture change happening there too, because there's for the last year, you know, and obviously much more so since, let's say, November, but since for the whole of the last year, there has been this gradual pulling away from DEI. I would say since like October 2023 or so, it's started to like really turn around, right? So maybe it's a good sign, you know, the fact that Rob won it, because I can't imagine a book like Gods of the Forbidden North from an author like Rob winning an Ennie in 2018 or 2019, right? So it could be a good sign.
really
Samuel Wright
enjoyed
said
Oh, sorry.
the Ennies were actually judged right this time. Oh, and Flint has an answer for you here. He says, the Reddit crowd's argument was that since Rob was raised with a Christian background, the demons who bred with women was a reference to abortion since it brought on evil. Okay, that's an interesting, that is quite the take there that the people at Reddit do. But then again, it's Reddit. Reddit is one place that is not engaging in an ideological transformation. If anything, they have tripled down on stupidity, you know. Shadowdark is VX and TCC fumbles, random level rewards, and some mediocre random tables. It's severely overrated, says Frank. Well, you know, I think that it's a good game. I think that it does what it's supposed to do, which is mostly like a kind of high intensity dungeon crawl stuff. It does that really well, probably. I mean, I haven't played it myself, but from what I've seen of it, it probably would do that pretty well. Now, you can still say it's overrated because of the enormous amount of hype that it got, right? Like that would, but that's not necessarily the fault. It's not to say that makes it a bad system, you know. Samuel Wright has the counterpoint. We could just shut up now. Let's let them have the whole debate here. Shadowdark is tightly designed, well organized, and has an open, easy to mod system. All right, so we've got some debate going on about Shadowdark, but let's see if we can get things back to Gods of the Forbidden North.
Can I chime in? Like for?
Oh yeah, please chime in. Give us. Sorry, you were meaning.
No. It's okay. I know you got. I just want to say I played Shadowdark a few times and I really enjoyed it. I didn't think I would. I thought that it was just like the latest trendy thing, and so I picked up copies, you know, and I played it, and I had not had that much fun playing in a long time. I played it 3 times, and I 4 times, and 2 of those I ran, and one of them I ran at North Texas RPG Con. I ran it raw. Rules is written, took some 3rd level pre-gens on the Shadowdark Darkling net or whatever. I forget the name of it. I pulls it up. It's saved in my favorites. So it comes right up. Netlings or something. I forget. But you can make a character on there. You guys know what I'm talking about, the ones that like it. And I made like 8 or 9 pre-gens, 3rd level. And I converted one of my chapters, Fort Eichenvar, which is like a big sort of battle with slavers, you know, bad dudes. Mm-hmm. And I ran it. We had a 3-hour block, and it was a lot of fun. It was a breeze to run. I probably screwed up on 1 or 2 things, but most of us hadn't really played it or only played it once and twice. And everyone we were all standing, shouting, yelling, and having a blast. And I have to say, I will give a strong head nod to the design choices of that game. I was pleasantly surprised. It was sort of a gamble that I took just to run it to see. And it really was fun. I have to say that I get that, like, I didn't get to use all of its mechanics. Like, I never really got all 4 times I played. I never got to use the timer torch thing that it's kind of, you hear the most about, but without that is basically the experience I've had. It was a great game. And I got to meet Kelsey the one time at North Texas. I saw a talk she gave with Matt Finch. A lot of industry people were there. And then afterward, I got to go up and I got a signature. That's what I was showing on the screen. I went up, I was like kind of geeking out. Like, I got to see Matt Finch and all these other people. And I'd never seen any of them before, you know? So I was like, here I am, my second Kickstarter. But I'm like, I'm just a fan here, you know? So I was going around using my pull to get signatures. That's all I was doing. Casey Christopherson worked for me, you know? But I got to meet her, and she was such a down-to-earth person. It was a 2-minute talk, but she was a really nice, pleasant person to know. I've noticed I think she kind of stays away from politics and stuff too.
Oh yeah, no, she does actually, because like,
and
if there was one person that could have, like Kelsey could have gone all in on that if she wanted to, right? Yeah. Like she, you know, again, she's LGBT plus or whatever you want to call it. And she could have like milked that to the nth degree, right? But she didn't. And that's actually tremendously clever and speaks well of her, you know, because it meant that the people who like, you know, like she doesn't cover up her sexuality, but the people who like that will automatically see her as an ally, right? And yet she doesn't make a big deal out of it, so that, you know, gamers that are, you know, like normie gamers are not going to be bothered by it, right?
No, yeah, she's just there to talk about gaming, and I respect that so much. No, you know, I'm not against anyone who has takes and they have things they're passionate about, politics, religion, whatever. I just, you know, like I'm just saying, like, the game was fun. She's a really nice person. She's very smart. Like I was learning a lot listening to her and Matt talk. They're both very smart people. And Matt's obviously a lawyer, and she's obviously a really good businesswoman. And like, I'm not that great.
What I've heard, it's actually her wife that is the really clever marketer and stuff like that. So
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I
her
use my wife.
Her wife's job is in that kind of work, in like promotions and things like that, right? So she helped make the original Kickstarter for the thing a success. Okay. But yeah, like, I mean, I can understand, like, the way what you just described, I think is probably the core utility of Shadowdark, right? Like, that is Shadowdark where it's at its best potential when you get a group, you put them into a dungeon, you go through, you use the tables and whatever else they have on there, and just run with it in that way, and it'll work really well, right? And I can't, it's hard for me to criticize it in any way in the system sense, because, as you know, like Frank pointed out, it's got elements of Dungeon Crawl Classics, which was also a big inspiration for me, and a bunch of the mechanics that are in there are also in my games, right? So, like, you know, Baptism of Fire has most of the same mechanics as Shadowdark, although, you know, so did Lion and Dragon, which I did years ago, right? So I've got seniority on that. But it also has a wider scope in terms of like the setting and the culture and everything. But it has the same deal too, that like from what I get, Kelsey wanted to try to make it very easy to generate the dungeon and all that sort of things, right? And in my Baptism of Fire and Sword and Caravan and my other medieval authentic books, I have a bunch of generators that you can use. Like, you can go in Baptism of Fire, just start traveling from one place to another, and if you use the tables that are there for the like setting generation, groups, places, and all that sort of thing, the game runs itself practically for the DM, you know. So it's the right way to design an OSR game today, right? Like, that's a winning formula. And I'm not going to take credit for it myself, because of course that the latter half of that, what I'm talking about, was probably started by Sine Nomine with you know, Stars Without Number and Red Tide and all of those games, right? Because that was a seminal breakthrough in like the OSR design school that he did there. And I'm, you know, everybody else who's ever done it, including me, was partially inspired by him. Anyway, Tabletop with Wolf Phototech says the turn from Force DI started with the Bud Light boycott. Yeah, that's true. It did. That was a big impact, but I think that the bigger turn started to happen. It started to happen after when the Harvard, the dual Harvard scandal happened, between like the issues with the pro-Palestine people that were causing havoc in the universities, plus the plagiarism scandal of the president of Harvard, who was clearly a DEI hire. That was like that was earth-shattering at certain levels, because it hit academia, which is where the whole DEI thing started, right? And it proved that, you know, this was a terrible idea, you know. So, and then after that, it started to snowball. And of course, the Trump campaign did a lot to like really show the weak spots of DEI, and so all of that has been like snowballing. It's been getting bigger and bigger as time goes by. Flint says, Rob, the campaign is huge. I know Volume 3 comes with an introduction to for GMs. What do you cover in the GM intro? I'll let you answer that question, Rob.
Let's see. Oh, okay. I guess it's pretty much similar. Just as dog hair. Pretty much similar. It's just going to show the next like continuation of all the breakdown of how much experience there is, you know, like approximately from treasure and from monsters. It's going to show like a quick summary of what's sort of the rough path of the players and what is covered in the volume. Like, so it starts with the castle on the surface, goes down to the dungeons underneath, goes to the caverns and tunnels underneath that, and then gets into the Cyclopean city, and then leads you to the Tesseract of Time. I mean, basically it's going to have that same structure as the first two. And of course it talks about like, it's going to have the same kind of information that, like, just repeating about the information on wandering monsters, the table, D12 you roll to see what your wandering monsters are doing when you encounter them. And, I mean, that's basically it, short and sweet, just like the second volume, just with third volume stuff replaced in there.
All right. So I've got a question for you. Now we're getting into the second half of the interview. Does the Forbidden North have orcs in it, or are they also missing from your monster manual?
Oh yeah, it's funny. I just got I ordered, like, to kind of stay on top of what everyone's doing, like wizards, and I got my monster manual in the other day, and I didn't know about the orc thing. Actually, I missed it on social media. Everyone thought, and I looked and I was like, "Oh, where's the orc?" And I was trying to look for I always go to the orc first and the ogre, like the stables, and I couldn't find it. And it's like, you got to look up the tough, and the tough is now the orc, but you got to give him orc because now the orc is like its own species.
Yeah, well, their point is, orcs are people too, right? Like, just so. Yeah,
I guess, but goblins aren't. I don't entirely agree with that notion. Not to get into all that stuff, but like, I agree with you on that. Like, it just seemed kind of silly, but
So, like, in the Forbidden North, are the orcs? Here's the question: are the orcs noble, non-violent families of undocumented Mexicans, or are you a bigot? It's your choice.
Well, I don't think I have any orcs in the
no?
Gods of Forbidden North, but this was years ago. I've got hobgoblins, I've got goblins, and then I got Sharg, which is sort of like my world's version of orcs, but they're more like bat-like men who are, they're degenerates, and they kind of represent unrestrained violence and evil.
That's what orcs are meant to represent, right? So but it's good. I like that you don't actually use orcs. I mean, none of my games have. Well, I guess technically, World of the Last Sun has orcs, because World of the Last Sun has everything because it's a Gonzo setting. But none of my medieval authentic games have orcs, because obviously orcs are not an actual medieval era monster, and it's not that I don't remove them because they're supposedly black people or Mexicans or something like that, right? But I've always thought that orcs are a very generic monster, right? And it's more interesting when people replace them, what they did. Dragonlance was the first one to do that, right? Like, they don't have there's no orcs in Dragonlance, which is really interesting, because they got, instead they have the Draconians, and they have goblins and hobgoblins that are more interesting. So it's that's a good idea, actually, to have an orc type race, but that are very different from orcs. That's clever.
My understanding, and I could be totally wrong about this because I'm not a historian, but my understanding is that, like, goblins are like something that you found in mythology and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken,
all world mythology, they're like Korean goblins, like they're everywhere.
Yeah. But I mean, orcs. I mean, am I wrong? Aren't they just sort of Tolkien's sort of invention?
Yeah. They're a creation of Tolkien. There's some, there are some precedents and things like that, but
okay.
Basically they were both the hobbits and the orcs are actually Tolkien's creation, where hobbits are meant to represent the noble and humble rural classes of pastoral England, right? Like the good people of the land, right? That right. Tolkien idolized. And orcs were meant to represent what happens to, like, those people when they have to move into the cities and work in industrial labor, right? That they turn into twisted, corrupted creatures because of the horrors of modernism, because Tolkien was fundamentally an anti-modernist, So it's a very interesting metaphor that he has with those two races. But like, in a larger sense, since then, I guess orcs have become quite popular in video games and RPGs, where orcs are kind of taking the place of, like, any number of terribly destructive monsters, that are meant to represent just the power of unrestrained violence and barbarity,
Yeah, I thought see that's one of the reasons why I wanted to replace orcs, because I thought they were more like a Tolkien thing.
Mhm.
And but goblins are something that's sort of like goblins, elves, dwarves, like that's kind of, you know, that's just everybody's.
Those are all traditional.
Yeah, right. So I thought like, okay, I want to distinguish from another guy's mythology / world or what, you know, setting. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna make my own version of quote unquote an orc, you know, like, and I mean, that's interesting. You talked about the industrialism. I knew Tolkien that was something he was playing with for sure. I'd never actually looked at the orc that way. I'd never heard of that. That's an interesting interpretation. I always saw them because of more of his Catholicism, just as demons, you know, because if I remember right, I could be totally wrong here, mixing up Peter Jacksonisms, but I remember that I think, isn't the backstory of the orc something like they were elves once, twisted by the, you know, I know that's
there were elves that
the,
get corrupted,
yeah,
and then end up, but then what they end up like being put into the service of Sauron to like tear apart the land, to tear down the forest, to mine, to build war machines, right? All of this stuff that is like metaphorical of industrialism, basically, in Tolkien's eyes. Yeah.
I guess I always read them as sort of like low level demons, like because if the elves are immortal, and I kind of saw them as sort of being angelic creatures, obviously not quite, you know that there's echoes of Catholicism and everything you wrote. I viewed the demons as sort of the opposite, since they were the fallen elves. I kind of viewed them that way when I interpret them. So, I mean, I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. I think I like to interpret, and so I think it's fun.
Well, the exception that demons are demons are fallen angels in kind of Western myth, right? And but the orcs, if I remember, are like they are tricked and then forced to be transformed into these abominations of themselves, right? And so, like, again, that's the country folk moving to the city for a better life, and then they end up living, like, in the early 20th century, even they would live in these horrible shanty towns in squalor, filled with alcoholism and disease, and these terrible conditions, right? So it was very much social commentary on his part. That was probably, because people like to say, oh well, Lord of the Rings was about World War I or World War II or something like that, and that, according to Tolkien, it wasn't, right? But Tolkien was directly giving these parallels when he was talking about hobbits or about orcs, that they were, he made pretty clear in his subtext, at least, that it was a criticism of the modern world.
That's an interesting interpretation. I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, Dan Vince says Tolkien seems to have changed his mind on the origin of orcs multiple times. Yeah. But it's just that stupid thing of Wizards of the Coast. Because they're postmodernists, there can't be such a thing as evil, right? So they're creatures that are just that are sentient but fundamentally destructive is something that they have to reject, right? Because the idea is that you get to create your what you feel is what you are, and so there couldn't possibly be something like that. So this is why initially the woke crowd tried to claim that orcs were a racist representation of Black people, and then they suddenly, and it seems so hypocritical, right? But it in a sense, it makes sense as they're continuing to evolve their postmodern theory. They say, no, actually, orcs are a noble representation of people that we condemn, like the illegal migrants that are coming from Mexico. Hence the Mexican orcs in the 2024 edition. It's so stupid, but it's a product of people who are so damaged by postmodernism that they can't understand the concepts of archetype or myth itself. Anyways. One of the things that, I mean, apparently you've bought the 2024 edition. You're one of a very small percentage of people who have. So congratulations, I guess, on that. But because I don't know, I just did my latest video that anybody watching right now can go check out after the live stream, is about pointing out that based on, I said Roll20, that was a mistake on my part. It was actually D&D Beyond. That there's actually a video that Wizards of the Coast put out where they were talking about how successful the new edition is. And the lady, the woman that replaced Kyle Brink was the guy who said that, you know, white men can't leave the D&D hobby fast enough, and then he eventually got fired. And he was replaced by this woman, and she was saying that the 2024 D&D is a huge success, and the proof of that is that on D&D Beyond, people have made 3.6 million D&D 2024 characters, right? And the problem is that there's like almost 20 million people on D&D Beyond, and you know, 3.6 million characters made. Probably a lot of people are making more than one character, right? But even in the best of situations, if we are to assume that everybody only made one character, that means that of all the people that were on D&D Beyond, who are by vast majority 5th edition 2014 players, of those 2 million people, only like 19% at most have made characters for 2024, which actually means that it's a really big disaster. It means they've lost, you know, 80% of their market there, you know, because otherwise those people would have been making characters too, right? So it's become a really big problem for them, and it's also been shown on like YouTube, where the D&D YouTubers and, you know, on Twitch and other stuff, all the influencers that were based on 5th edition are currently having this crisis. And you see people making videos about, like the D&D 5e guys are making videos about, oh, you know, all my videos aren't getting views anymore and all this stuff. Like, it seems to me that and this is where I'm getting to a question for you. Sorry for the long intro there, it seems to me that the bubble of popularity, right? Because there was, to some extent, 5th edition, as great an edition as it was, and made by some of the most brilliant people in the hobby, myself included, was a big success, but it was also riding the wave of this kind of fad of popularity that was caused by a number of factors. You know, some people talk about the Big Bang Theory. I think that the moment that it started to like explode into like the level of a fad was with the Stranger Things series, and then gradually Critical Role became very popular, and that also pushed it, and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of people who were playing D&D 2014 edition because it was fashionable, and I think that bubble has burst. And I guess my first question to you is, do you think that's having any effect on you? And if not, do you think it will have an effect for good or bad in the future?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'll be honest. I'm not so sure. I don't know. I mean, I assume, because if let's just say, you know, everything you just says correct. I don't know. I haven't looked at any data, so I don't really know. But let's just say it was correct for the sake of the argument. I guess, like, yeah, of course it would, because if it funnels more people into other games like the OSR, wherever, or outside the D&Dism land, you know, like the Chaosium and other companies, I'm sure of course it's going to help anyone like you and me and others, like, because we're in those areas, and we're going to have herds of new, interested, curious customers, backers, whatever. So yeah, I think that definitely would help. I don't look at, I'll be honest, I don't follow very many headlines. If I go into social media and I see something pop up my feed a few times, I'll go, maybe I'll look into that. And I glance at it real fast, and I see what's going on. I get the gist of it, get the 2 or 3 sides that are involved, and okay. And then I just to kind of know what's going on, and then I kind of withdraw and don't care. Like, unless it's like direct, like the OGL was the only time that the OGL crisis was the only time I ever commented, I think, ever, because it affected me so much, just like everybody. But
I don't think I asked you, but you don't have a YouTube channel, right? You're not doing YouTubing or anything like that, or any other kind of like thing, like, okay. Because
yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that in the last couple of months, my level of like views and attendance and subscriptions has actually been going up, right? In stark contrast to all these sometimes much bigger 5th edition channels that seem to be like collapsing. So I was around when the first, when the OSR first got big. I don't know how long you've been into the OSR or not, but if you'll recall, the OSR was created around the time. Well, it was created in the 3.5 era. Technically, the first, like the clone books were starting to be made at that time, and then when 4th edition came out, that is the moment that 3.5 suddenly started to take off, right? Like it started to take off in a much bigger way than just like, for a while it was like this little thing, people mostly making free games that were just copies, like, like Labyrinth Lord and Swords and Wizardry and stuff like that. It was doing okay, but then as soon as 4th edition came out, and 4th edition was a disaster from the beginning, right? There are people now, I said so all along, but there were people who now admit that, that were involved. And the failure of 4th edition was, to me, a direct influence on the success of the OSR in those initial periods, especially like that was right around the time that the second wave of OSR started. That you had like Lamentations of the Flame Princess and stuff like that, and they became big in part because there were disgruntled people that didn't like 4E, that were looking for alternatives. Of course, Pathfinder did a really big thing there with the, basically doing a 3.5 copy, but so did the OSR. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if you know this, I did a video about this once too, that in the last 5 years, the OSR has been steadily increasing in success in terms of sales. And in particular in Kickstarters, you can literally see, because you can track every Kickstarter, and some people did that. And over the last 5 years, Kickstarters for OSR have overtaken Kickstarters for 5E in terms of their level of success, right? Like if you're trying to do a Kickstarter for a 5E, third-party product versus an OSR product, you're more likely to be successfully funded if you do an OSR product. Okay? And the number of OSR products and the amount of money that they've been generating has been going up on a steady rate over the last 5 years. So the OSR has continued to be strong, and it is it's now going to benefit from what appears to be a mistake in terms of the edition that D&D has created. So I think we might be coming into like a whole other window of opportunity for OSR products.
No, that's interesting. I feel like maybe I watched your video on that. Did Ben Milton do something about that too? I thought.
Didn't who?
What's his name? Ben Milton, the guy who does the Questing Beast. He's got the.
I don't know. I never watched his channel, to be honest. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I never have time.
Yeah, it's possible because there was somebody who did an article presenting this like somebody had collected all the data and made an article about it, right? So I wasn't the only one.
No, right. I think I saw a video about you talking about this. It's a while ago, right? And then I think he, around the same time, everyone starts talking about the same thing. I think he did something too, and I saw a little bit of what he said. But that's interesting. That's fascinating. I think I played a little bit of the new 2024. I tried it out. Obviously looking at it to see if it's worth a conversion or not. And I thought it was fun. As a fight, I like fighters, so I'm always a fighter. So I tried a fighter out first, and I thought the fighter really had a lot going for it. The changes they made. If you get out of all the other, I guess, controversial areas and just look at the games themselves, the rules themselves, it's a really clean presentation of those rules, and from a technical writing standpoint, it's a vast improvement presentation wise. I think that the first book had some missteps on what it was trying to do, at least in terms with the older crowds like us with the art. We're used to a certain kind of art, and I'm not trying to read.
Well, the art was one of the most criticized things, right? Like it was, the gay dwarf, the great gay dwarven bakers, the Mexican orcs, the fact that apparently 80% of the character depictions are of humans are non-white, and there's, as I pointed out, there are probably more Black women in the D&D Player's Handbook art than there are Black women actually playing D&D, because they went like crazy with that, right? Like it's covered in black human females, as if to try to present that as like like that's their main audience or something. Like, it's just stupid, you know, like it's ridiculous. And the artists now, you know, it's come out, the artists were told, you know, well, we want really good art, but don't make white men because there's too many of those, you know, like that they literally gave those instructions, you know.
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous because 80% of gamers are still straight white males, you know, like it's just a fact. It's not about, you know, like it's not about anything else than that. It's just that you are going against your own audience. It's like using a transgender person to promote Bud Light. You know, it's just a stupid plan when you don't know your audience.
Yeah, I guess it seemed from, you know, I teach rhetoric, so we're always like looking at like rhetorical audience and like, you know, if you're trying to make a persuasive text who you're looking at, you know, I'm sure you've heard of some of that stuff, Aristotle, right? You're a smart guy. But I guess it seemed to me like they were picking a different crowd, like than I guess typically, you know, like I would find myself in. And
yeah, that's the problem though, is that that crowd doesn't exist. There's no black woman that's going to just randomly pick up a player's hand and go, oh, that person looks like me, so I'm going to buy this and start being a gamer, right? And in fact, that isn't really what they're doing. They're doing it for two reasons. One, to virtue signal with each other. And second, to tell their own audience, like you see this everywhere in TV shows and movies, right? Like they did it with Star Wars, they did it with Doctor Who, where they're intentionally telling their current audience, you are bad people and you should feel bad. And we're going to do this in the format of something that you love. We're going to force you to look at these things because we think you should be ideologically punished in a struggle session because of what you are, you know. And that's the worst way to convince someone to do anything, you know. Like there are good ways, there are good rhetorical techniques by which you could say, well, you know, you could have characters that are more diverse or something like that, but the way you do that is by showing and not telling, you know, like by having a character that becomes interesting and appealing rather than saying, look, this is the black woman, that's the story, that's her whole story, right? Because in a postmodern context, that's it. The story isn't the hero's journey, it's what is your identity, and so by definition the character is that and nothing else, you know, like, and that's a terrible means. And it's why, you know, this is an 80-20 issue, right? When you talk about DEI, when you're talking about transgender, when you're talking about all this stuff, the reason the Democrats get their ass kicked on it in the US, for example, is because literally any poll says, you know, like 80%, for example, the executive order Trump just did saying that he's not going to allow transgender people to participate in women's sports. You know, the polling is 79% are in favor of that ban, right? Because that's an 80-20 issue, right? So you don't go and say, well, you know what, we're gonna get the ideological win for ourselves. We're gonna feel good about it, and then piss all of you guys off, because in the long run, you lose the war, right? You feel nice about the battle, but you lose the war. You know, like just speaking as like if I was trying to advise these people politically, do you actually want to change hearts and minds? But the answer is no, they don't want to change hearts and minds. They just want to feel superior to you. That's what they want. And they're willing to lose to do it. They're willing to lose money. They're willing to lose sales, but they're going to get to feel smug about it, you know? And it's terrible. Sorry, I jumped onto a rant there. You triggered a pundit rant. Congratulations.
Press the button. No, I was just going to say that I like the art overall in the DMG. The Monster Manual, from what I've seen, I haven't gotten a chance to really dig into the third one, but from just skimming I did, it looked
has it come out already? Is it like, do you have the Monster Manual?
Yeah, no,
I thought it hadn't come out
got
yet.
Just got it.
Okay, I guess it's out. All right, I'm out of date.
Yeah, I thought like the art's got pretty, you know, it's got like it's more action oriented. You know what I mean? Like,
I saw a bit of that, yeah, because the player's handbook definitely isn't
action. You know, swinging an axe for Zeta. You know, I felt like the first book with the art
instead of gay dwarves baking cupcakes. You know, like that's a very different thing.
Like a lot of them were like, it was all like, look at my character. You know, it was all look at my character.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, you know, because in other ones you had like, you know, in third edition you had everybody like in armor and doing just kind of standing still, right? And so you can criticize some parts of that, right? But in most versions of D&D, what you have is like when you're showing the characters, you're showing them in some kind of an action or ready for action context, right? In 2024 D&D, you're showing them in like a slice of life context, right? Like the Mexicans are just hanging around, they're playing with falcons, right? The dwarves are baking cookies. You know, the elves are standing around looking, you know, like they're at some kind of a fancy party, right? Like there's no adventuring going on in any of them, you know.
Yeah, I guess that's my thing with the art is that the main thing is like, where's that action that's, you know, like I remember like when I was a kid and I, you know, what is this, 89, 90, whatever it was, and that second edition handbook with that dude who's like flexing Arnold style and kicking down the door with his axe and his buddies are behind him, like you're like, yeah, let's do this.
There's so many great iconic. There's an enormous number of iconic pieces of fantasy art that became famous because of TSR, right? Like, and it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Three Orcs has a comment here. He says, "Hey, RPGPundit." I think it's Pundit, but I'll forgive that. I can tell you why the D&D YouTuber channels are dying. People are bored of the verbal vomit of no useful content. Well, I think that it's true, especially for 5e stuff, that there is a lot of stuff that's just repetitive and dumb. And you have people that were like, that have been playing D&D for like 6 months that suddenly put on a YouTube channel and try to act like they're experts, and you can really tell they're not, you know. And I hope that you don't feel the same way about my channel or some of the other really good OSR channels out there, you know. So at least I hope that was referring to the 5e people and not to me, but there we are. Got a question here for you, Flint. Sorry, for you from Flint, rather. What can you tell us about the intro adventure, The Eye of Jakara, without giving too much away? How does it seed into the main campaign?
Yeah, no, great question. So the idea is that, and I did this with a lot of the campaigns I read, you know, over the years when I, you know, my home games. Basically, the idea is like, I love sandboxes, but I've always felt like you got to give them some sort of push, and after that, you back off. And you only throw things at them if like they really are just having a meltdown of I have too many choices, or they just aren't a group that pushes themselves as much. And then I start to question whether I should have ran them to sandbox. But anyway, but I turned around, I was like, okay, I want to design an adventure like that. Like it gives the party already a purpose to be together. So the basically the gist of it is this: they have an amulet that they got adventuring before this started. It's the middle of things, like most great fantasy works. And they're already right. No, and they're on a ship. They're coming in, and they're landing in Valkengard, and but they know they're being followed, or they think they are. They hope they're not, and of course they are by somebody else who they know wants it, and he's not good. So, and it's, you know, that was the idea, and I thought it would be clever to encourage, you know, players to sit down and kind of like make their characters together the first time. I always like video games. I know Pundit's not a big video game guy, but I always like video games where the intro kind of like you make your character while you're looking like Cyberpunk or something, you're looking in the mirror shaving and you get to pick your skin, you know, like, am I an orc or am I, you know, something like that, like Shadowrun, or, you know, like you get to like learn about the story while you're picking your character. So you're not bored. Like you're learning about like kind of getting a little bit of lore here and there while you're making all these choices. I thought that'd be kind of neat to do that with the group as a whole. Everyone's kind of, hey, there's a step process, for example, in Old School Essentials, making your character. So I was like, well, okay, what if we just take that, frame it with things,
make like it into a series of vignettes, basically.
Right, and you're learning a little bit about the world while you're hanging out, eating pretzels or whatever. And let's all roll our ability scores. We all laugh. Now, referee breaks you for a second, reads a little something, then you go back to the next step. Yeah, I'm going to be a dwarf. I'm going to be a, you know, whatever. And that was the idea, but that's it. That it's after that, there's sort of a carrot, like you kind of like Skyrim or something, like, you know, after the dragon blows everything up in the first scene, and then you're like, okay, I'm supposed to go that way, and there's this little thing flashing in the distance, but I don't have to. I can go that way and go that way, and that's sort of what I was kind of going for, is that there is something if you want it, but there's other things by the end of that first adventure that might lead you in a different direction. And the group kind of gets to decide, and there's no real time pressure on them to go after the main carrot, you know, and, you know, do we want to really go and do this with this amulet? So the idea is sort of like, we can hang on to that. No one else has the amulet. Let's go do something else. And they have that choice. That's
It's a
kind of
sandbox with trails in it, but
right.
not with a railroad.
Yeah. Or and you know, some groups can't always like, you know, they can't meet off, and I'm sure we all know this type of those type of groups, and like, so sometimes if they don't want a sandbox or they can't do that conceivably, having the adventure path there where it's like, okay, we're just going to start at the next part and we're going to quickly just tell you this is what happened the last 2 weeks. That's option is there, and there is a train, if you will, a line, a path that you can use in that sense if you'd like. And I think that it kind of meets everyone's needs as I see it. But I think that that was sort of the idea. That was the design intent behind it, was to give groups wherever they're at and whatever their needs are, the ability to use the adventure as they see fit, you know. Like I've got one of my groups that one of my buddies, my best friends. His name is Byron, and he's running a game in Florida, down in New Smyrna, if anyone lives in Florida. And he's running it over there, and his group is basically they're running with the 5e rules, with 2024 rules, funny enough. And they're turning around, and they're like at 11th level, and they've not even, or 7th level. It's like really high up, either 7th or 11th. I think it might even be 11th, but I think it was 7th, if I remember. The rhyming word, you know, I can't remember. And they said that basically they had never left the cities. They went back and forth between Valkengard, Skalberg, and they just don't go out in the wilderness. They're scared.
Yeah.
And so they're doing all these like urban stuff. And he was telling me, like, there's so much in those areas that like I can just take it as the DM and just run with it. And it's we just keep finding more things to do, and we haven't even gotten out of those things. And that's always fun to hear that, you know. And that was my goal. I don't know what your experience has been, Pundit, like running games, you know, but like when I run games, I've like let's say I go get it, like, I don't know, I'm just using this as an example. I go get a Forgotten Realms book, and you know, it's like, wow, there's so much cool ideas. This is a really neat setting, but a lot of times there's not a ton of like gameable content in that book. And then the kind of opposite of that is you get this generic adventure or something where, you know, there's not really a setting, you drop it in, but then you're like, okay, so like sometimes you play this game of, I'll go buy a setting book, and then let me go buy adventures I think I could drop in there. And then I have to alter them to make sure it fits. And I was like, can't I provide a product that does all that at once? Can I provide a product that gives you a setting and so much gameable content in that setting that you don't have to leave it? And you don't have to add anything if you don't want to, because there's enough there. If you want to, you of course can, you know, but you don't have to. There's so much there that you don't need. And that's what I always wanted. Like, and I always feel like every adventure I've read that I've really admired gets really close to that. There's a few that you could argue have done it. And I really admire those pieces. Like, I always liked Talus by Monty Cook. I thought that it's this, you know, the huge city with the big dungeon underneath. It's got kind of everything there, but there is this broader setting. It does discuss it, but it really focuses just on that one, I guess, hex, if you will. And then there's like Arden Vul. I really like Arden Vul. It's a huge, awesome dungeon. Rapanathuk, however you pronounce it. But both of those are just mostly dungeon, so they don't have the setting. So like, there's so much you can do with those. And I've taken them and kind of taken their other products and strung them together like a quilt, you know, to make like my own kind of version. So I have everything that I look for, and I have this Roll20 game of you know, my Rapanathuk game where I have 300 something dynamically lit pages and, you know, like handouts and like everything. It's got Bard's Gate in it, Tomb of Abasthor, you know, the Demons and Devils module I used to love back in the 3.0 days. It's like the Rapanathuk reloaded version, because that was my favorite version of all the belt. It was a box set, that's why. It had the cool Orcus thing on the front and inside. So I strung all those together and used Worldographer to make this huge thing. And I guess like that's always what I wanted from a product, was like the huge freedom of the huge sandbox with the hex crawl, but also with all these dungeons, small and big, and that one big mega dungeon is like the set piece. And that's literally that's
the Gods of the Forbidden North right there. Yeah.
That's Bill Webb, thanks.
You asked how I do it, right? And well, in my products, if you see like in Dark Albion and Baptism of Fire and like in Sword and Caravan, what you have is essentially sandboxes, but they're sandboxes that have vast amounts of information about the setting, right? So like Sword and Caravan covers the entire Silk Road from Acre to China, from between 1190 to 1220 in the Middle Ages. And you're the kind of the default for it is the idea that you can either, there are two basic campaigns for it. One is you're a crusader and you're fighting in the third and fourth and fifth crusades.
That's cool.
Or really the third, the German crusade, and the fifth, because the fourth never gets there. They stop and loot Byzantium instead, Constantinople. But the other one is basically a kind of travel journeying sort of campaign across the Silk Road, right? But what I do is in these products, besides the timeline and besides the setting material, I also have a whole bunch of random generators that facilitate the DM's work, right? So they're traveling along, and the DM by using these generators can create events and encounters and plot devices and missions for the characters and all this sort of thing. And the characters can jump into them or not, right? And the campaign, as I leave it to my players to determine how they're going to run themselves in the game, right? So my Sword and Caravan campaign, which started when I was first designing the setting, it started out with the characters being in the Third Crusade with Richard Lionheart and all that. And then after Crusade's done, they accompany this monk who's been tasked by the church to travel all across the Silk Road to find the lost Christian communities, right? All the little pockets of Christianity that are along the Silk Road, and to try to bring them back in communication with the Mother Church, right? And so they go traveling all along, the Silk Road, and along the way there have been times when they've just been going through at a fast pace, having sudden encounters in certain places. And there are other times when they stop for a while, right? Like they were in Baghdad for quite a while because it's a really big and interesting city, right? And it has all kinds of stuff going on. So, one of my Pundit Files episodes issues is the medieval guide to Baghdad, right? That gives you all the details about the city. And like more recently now, they're in the lands of the Seljuk Turks, and because they were like allies of the Sultan Togrul, who was in a civil war against his own vizier. And they helped him defeat that vizier and retake his kingdom. They've taken control of this kind of derelict little town, and they got permission to allow Christians to travel to that town and to inhabit it. And they've basically taken over this town now. They're trying to manage this town, but there's like all these tensions, right? Because like there were still some Muslims living in the town, and so there's like some tensions in terms of coexistence, even though the town was like dying out, and this is like a way to revitalize it. And then the neighboring town, which looks at them as a potential business rival, is also full of like Shia Muslims who are particularly aggressive, and there's there's likely to be all kinds of problems, and they're sometimes making good choices and sometimes making bad ones. But they've been there like now in game terms for quite a while, but in like real time for several months, I think, and it's really interesting because I know that eventually that's probably going to blow up in their faces, but it's really funny that they just decided to do that, right? Like, I didn't push them to do that. It was the idea of one of the players to try to like finagle their connections to the Sultan to be able to get the opportunity to get territory on the Silk Road, right? And so when you give them a whole bunch of opportunities of like things that they're going to run into, and then let them make the choice. And then sometimes they'll do what's expected, but sometimes they'll do stuff that's like completely off the wall. And that's what I love about DMing, is when they do stuff that I'm not expecting them to do, So that's kind of my style in this sort of thing. So it is definitely a sandbox, but it's a sandbox that is continually prompted by a living world, right? Because I think that's one of the mistakes some people make with sandboxes. And people who sometimes say they don't like sandboxes is because the sandbox they've seen is like a map, and the map says, well, in this place there's a village, and in this place there's a tribe of orcs, and in this place is that, and it all looks like a set piece, like in like some of those really old video games where you go to the town and people say something or whatever, and then you leave, and then if you come back again, they'll say the exact same thing, and it's like nothing has changed, right? Like nothing's happening when they're not there, So
They're
like you have
this
to.
while you're gone, they're like, and then you walk
Yeah,
in.
exactly. Yeah. So it's like the key to a sandbox is it has to be a living world, right? And the world has to change when the player characters aren't there as well, you know, or things have to change that have nothing to do with stuff the player characters do, right? And that's kind of the secret of making a successful sandbox. And then it creates its own opportunities, I think. Anyway, the next question I had for you is, you kind of answered a little bit about this. You're going to do a larger setting book of the kind of world of the Forbidden North. Do you have any other future projects in mind?
I mean, I guess there was another interview I did where I was asked a similar question. Basically, I was I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. What I told you earlier was sort of one idea. I mean,
like, do you see yourself continuing to make products in the future, even if you maybe don't know what they are right now, or was this like this was your baby and this is all that you really want to do?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I have ideas. Ideas. I could keep going. I originally said that like it depends on how well this does, and obviously it's done pretty well on the Kickstarter. So certainly there's incentive to go forward. But I guess I'm not sure, because part of me has I might do the 3 books and I might decide, like I might come back and just redo it and that's it. Moving to the sunset, because I do want to write like screenplays. I do want to work on comic books. I want to work. I kind of want to do a bunch of stuff. I'm
That's true. Like the more successful I became in writing RPG products, the less time I've had for any of the other things that I'm interested in, right? So that is the cost. Yeah.
Right. No, and I mean, my best friend, he tells me all the time, like Robert, you gotta, if you get good at one thing, you gotta stick with it. And like, he's probably right. He's probably 100% right. And yet at the same time, I don't know. I've always been like that. Like I did fiction before I became an RPG guy. I published short stories, started getting some success. And then I wanted to do poetry, and I just started learning and I started getting publications, got about the same amount. And then I said, I'm going to do something. Like I just kind of get bored. And now I kind of want to work at a video game place, and I want to work and do narrative design. And I've had people talk to me about that privately. And I've thought deeply about it, and I've considered it, and I'm not sure yet if I can still do all of them. I mean, nothing's saying I can't. I don't know. But there is a lot more RPG material in my head. Don't get me wrong. I want to do the Overlords of Steel. That's my next book. I was thinking if I go there, that's what I want to do. And that would be more of an expansion. But there's also a part of me that wants to do a system, a new game system, like not just a retro clone, but like an actual new system. And I have one that's.
Wait, do you mean an OSR, like third wave OSR product, or something that is just not related to D&D at all?
Totally new.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that.
Well, right. And like, so is it smart to do that? Is it wise? Is it, there's some
business wise, probably not. But then again, if you're famous enough, it could work, like, I mean, the Critical Role people probably are going to end up making money off of their terrible RPGs that they're making now that aren't D&D based, but usually like the thing about the OSR is that it has reliability and compatibility, and you can make really innovative OSR games, right, that are like really out there and kind of like weird new directions of rules and of magic and of mechanics and of all kinds of setting and theme and everything, and it'll still be good, right? But the main thing though is that it has that the OSR allows you to have, you have 100 different OSR books from 100 different people, and you can still pick and choose stuff from out all of them to put into your games, right? So the compatibility is like the part of the reason for the OSR's huge success.
I thought about too, like maybe I should, instead of doing a system that's new, to go with what you're kind of saying here. Like, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, well, I could always take like, old school essentials, or, take 5e or whatever, pick some system, right? And like make a setting for it that's, like a lot of people do, like a variant handbook essentially for let's take OSC and do this with it. Let's take 5e and do that with it. Kind of like Monty Cook when he did Arcana Evolved or Unearthed. I don't know if you remember that series. That was one of my favorite 3rd edition products with Mark. I think Mike Merles was on it. And then he did Iron Heroes. I think Mike Merles did that. And I always liked those, that they were alternate kind of views of 3rd edition. I thought that'd be kind of cool, and I could do that with
I mean, Lion and Dragon, which is also, which is where I designed basically my version of OSR rules, the same rules that are in Baptism of Fire. They started with I ran Dark Albion originally as a Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign. And as we were playing it, I realized that because I wanted it to be really medieval authentic, there was stuff in Lamentations that didn't work for me, right? And so I started to change stuff, and I started to change more stuff. And I started, some of it was because there was stuff that just didn't feel right for the setting, like the magic system, which was still basically, it was a grittier version, like Lamentations is a grittier version of the standard Vancian magic, right? But that still was too different than what real medieval magic was like, right? So I said, okay, well, let's scrap the whole Vancian thing and do a system based on medieval magic and stuff like that. And then other stuff that I just kind of like the idea of random leveling and things like that, and parrying rules and critical hits and stuff like that. And so I ended up creating my own system. So I think one of the questions you can look at if you're planning to do to try to write a set of rules of your own is looking at your setting, right, at the Forbidden North and the rest of your world, and saying, well, how much of the D&D system in OSC, which is, I believe, the rule book you're currently using as your basis for, how much of that fits perfectly with this world, and how much do you think could be better done in a different way, right? Like whether you're talking about the lethality of combat or the nature of magic or character classes or all sorts of stuff like that, right? Religion, whatever, right? And then that's where you see what you want to change, and then you look at a whole bunch of other people's games and see if they've got good ideas you can steal from it, and then you think up some initiative, hopefully some original stuff of your own or variations thereof, and that's how you end up making a third wave OSR game, and there are so many excellent third wave OSR games out there nowadays that have basically used that process,
If I had to throw money right now, like throw money down on something, I think the strongest choice I have is probably just keep working within what I'm doing. Maybe expand to other systems I thought were worth the investment.
Ryan Nilsson here said, do some mini modules, and I always recommend that to everybody, because especially if you're talking about income stream, right? I've been fortunate that pretty much all of my games have made me money, right? But one of the things that becomes a very good regular income stream is if you end up writing a bunch of little adventures or source books, right? They can be quite short, right? Like the Pundit Files and Pundit Presents, they tend to average around maybe 10 pages long each, right? And they sell for the Pundit Presents was selling back then for $2.99, and as you know, the Pundit Files are for $3.50, and that doesn't seem like a lot of money. But once you start, because POD is forever, and because PDFs are forever, as you start having once you've got 50 of these or 100 of these, the ones that you wrote years ago are still selling, and the new ones you write are selling, right? And so that has this. The long tail effect cumulatively becomes a fairly decent regular income stream, which is, in terms of labor requirement, is a lot less than writing a 500-page book, right? Even though a 500-page book will make you more money, especially initially, but it takes a lot more time to do all that, right? Whereas, if I put out a Pundit Files issue every 3 weeks, then every 3 weeks I'm adding one more item to the long tail, and especially, you've gotten a lot of fame for Forbidden North, so you wouldn't have to do that. You could just keep writing big books if you wanted to. But I always tell newcomers, don't make your first product a 400-page book of your of your setting or of your dreams or something like that. Start writing a bunch of little adventures, right? And get your name out there and start to build up a, like do some social media and start to build up a fan base. And then the people who like your little products will buy your big products, right? So it's, but mini modules are a good way also to keep people involved once you've had a product, right? Like, so I've got Baptism of Fire, and then, people want more stuff for that. And I have written now one bigger book for Baptism of Fire, and I'm going to do another one about the last Vikings. But in between that, while they're waiting, I'm putting out like these mini adventures, like the Bones of St.Florian, and those do very well. So, and it's a shorter time period that you can put them out in.
It definitely is appealing to do a smaller work. I have a lot of my backers tell me like,
it's both fan service.
Yeah, good.
It's both fan service and good business. All right, so I got another question for you here, which is apparently, I don't know if it's true or not, but according to what we heard from one of the people on the chat, at least Reddit seems to believe that you are a devout Christian. I don't know if you want to confirm that or not.
I'm very, very Catholic. Yes, I used to be Baptist. Okay. I was a Baptist. At first, I was an atheist, then I was a Baptist. Then I had a radical conversion to Roman Catholicism, and I've been that since I guess 12, 13 years. I pray every day. I attend mass. Good little Catholic boy, kind of nerdy. So makes my wife happy, I guess. I don't know.
I didn't know that about you, but I already had this question ready because it's actually about somebody else, but about a comment that I've got a friend of mine named John Delarose, who's a science fiction writer mostly, but also he is very into RPGs, and he has a YouTube channel. And he is like me, a bit of a shitlord, right? He likes to cause controversy, and so sometimes he says some very controversial kind of things. Like one of the recent ones he said was that the Satanic Panic was like a psyop, or something like that. But another one that he said, I really want to have him on here, but we just he's got a difficult schedule, so I haven't been able to get him onto an episode of the Encounter yet. But John, if you're listening, I still really would love to have you on. But he did another controversial statement relatively recently, where he said that to be able to really understand how to play D&D, you have to be a Christian. And I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on it? Now, when I read this question, I didn't know you. For all I knew, you could have been an atheist or a Hindu or a Satanist or something. But as it happens, you are a Christian. What do you think about John Delarose's comment?
I guess did he explain further like what he meant, or did he just
he might have later, but in the original tweet that he put out, he just said, no, you can't really understand how to play D&D unless you're a Christian. I have some ideas. I think I know what he means, but let's start with the basic comment.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, if we want to get technical here before we get into theology and stuff, I guess I don't know what Gygax's belief system was, or Arneson's.
Gygax was, I believe, at one point he was like kind of a nominal Christian. Then when D&D became really big, he had a period of debauchery there where he was living in LA while they were doing the D&D cartoon, and he was he's the only guy in history who managed to have like hookers and blow money from writing RPGs, right? And he himself, he later presented that as like that was kind of a dark period in his life. And then later in his older years, he became very devoutly religious, very devoutly Christian.
So he was okay. I didn't.
He had a Christian upbringing, and he later became, in his later years, he became a very religious person.
Well, I think I would disagree. I think that's my initial, without thinking too deeply. I've just never heard this. You just sprung this on me. I would say, just for the sake of us chit-chatting here, my initial thing is to say, well, I disagree, but I'm not sure what he means entirely by that. I'd have to sit and think about it. But I guess if you just take a very literal approach, D&D sprang out of wargaming. You don't need to be any belief system to play that. I mean, did Tolkien have an influence? Okay, we know he's Christian Catholic, but I mean, like, and I guess in that sense, you have to be heroic. So what is heroic? So you start thinking what defines it. And original D&D had a very like manila way of looking at it. So maybe that's what he's talking about, the paladin and the notion of like Aragorn and Legolas. You know, it wasn't, if I remember my history right, which I could totally be getting wrong here, and I'm sure you would know better than I do, but isn't that what Arneson and Gygax, how they kind of did? Isn't that how D&D kind of appeared? They were doing wargaming. One day they were like, hey, let's just make this one guy instead of a unit, right? And they
yeah,
were
that's the short version of it. If you want to like know the whole like development process, there's this incredible documentary that a guy named Griffith Morgan put out called Secrets of Blackmoor. And it is so worth watching, right? Because it tells you the story of like, it's focused on Dave Arneson and his group, which was really where kind of the concept of D&D first kind of started happening. But then it also, you know, he brings in Gygax and stuff like that. And it shows you how that whole process happened. It is very interesting. Strongly recommend that documentary to everyone.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to understand what he's saying. What's his comment really like pertain? Is he doing that on the piggyback of some issue? You know, is he trying to make some statement about something else? Like, and I don't, obviously I don't know I've never heard of him until you mentioned him, so I don't know what that is, but I don't know. It's an interesting comment. Certainly going to garner attention.
Here we are. Part of the goal, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
But I'd like to hear your thoughts, I guess, because that probably is going to inform me more on what he meant.
Just one sec here. I'm going to see if I can find here the original tweet. Let me see here. Okay, he said, was this the first one? I think it was. No, hang on. That can't have been it. All right. Well, I haven't found his original. His original tweet was very short, but I think, and of course he's very Christian, right? But I did find another tweet of his that was from the 18th of January. So this has to have been maybe this is kind of his follow up of it. He says, Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, was a devout Christian. Tabletop RPGs are an inherently Christian concept. Real gamers follow Christ. And he did that was on Gary Gygax Day, right? January 18th, and it quotes Gary Gygax. It says Gary Gygax had at one point said, "All I am is another fellow human being that has at last, after many wrong paths and failed attempts, found Jesus Christ." So I guess that's his elaboration on that.
Yeah, but but I mean, if we want to be, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, that's what I do literally for a living.
Oh yeah.
So I guess the first thing
that's part of the goal here. Yeah, let's be devil's advocate.
Yeah, so I guess like the first thing I would think is that he's I mean, if even if Gary Gygax said that, and I'm not denying that he did, it's like that probably happened after he did D&D. So
yeah, I mean that's something that I'm sure Gary Gygax said in his, you know, like in the last 10 years of his life.
Right. Like, right. So I guess the thing I would say is that seems like a little bit of a stretch to make that leap. You know, I'm not obviously like not a Christian, you know, like I'm not trying to say, you know, his beliefs or anything wrong, obviously, but I'm just thinking that seems like a hot take that's just kind of taking something and stretching it a little too far. And I mean, if you want to get historical and direct, like it seems to me like that, like the founders, I don't know their personal beliefs or what they were at the time, so I can't really totally comment, but it's just a wargaming thing, which he happened to use Tolkien to see of who Tolkien was, and Tolkien happened to have Christianity. Now you could say like, yeah, a lot of this is based on the Middle Ages, and of course what was dominant during that time, the church, of course, without doubt. But I mean, you know, like, I mean, that's how it started, but D&D has grown beyond like the Middle Ages, and obviously like a lot of it now has multiple settings. I mean, right, anyone can look, we all know this. It's 50 years, we've had different takes. You could play a game that's more Moorcock, which obviously is not, you know, other characters who are not, you know, like Howard. If you take a setting more along those lines, like that's clearly not that, you could still play it, have fun, have a memorable campaign, and nobody at the table could theoretically be that, and that happens all the time. So it just seems to me like a statement that's attempting to get likes or controversy, but you know,
yeah.
I don't even have to comment, but you by all means probably thought
I
about this
think
more than I did.
I have thought about it because, you know, my degrees are in history, but mainly religious history and comparative religion, right? So this is an interesting subject to me. And I will say that, yeah, I don't call myself a Christian because I don't think I'm quite, I belong to no religious denomination. I'm kind of a universalist. And I don't think I'm kind of worthy of being called a Christian. Honestly, I'm amazed by how many people do call themselves Christians with a great deal of ease, you know, because I think that it's got to really mean something. But I am, you know, I'm very I'm very interested in Christianity. I've researched it very thoroughly. I'm a great admirer of the Christian religion and of Judaism, the Old Testament and all of that, the Old and New Testament both. I think it is, you know, like Richard Dawkins recently confessed, you know, I would be very afraid of a post-Christian world, you know. So that's kind of my background there. And I certainly do believe in a supreme being that is the true and living God Most High. Okay. But I think, you know, obviously there's a good amount of trolling going on with John. John loves doing that, just like I do, right? And so, you know, part of this is just kind of amusing. Part of it is also, no doubt, something he really believes in because he is a very devout Christian, as far as I understand it. And, you know, a militant Christian, right? He's not one of these kind of namby-pamby Christians, you know. he's really kind of hardcore. But I do think that in what he says, I think the element of truth of that is precisely that concern about the post-Christian world. And I've seen, for example, nowadays even some Christian theologians or you know, clergymen, preachers and whatnot have been talking about that. I saw this recent conference that there was it was an evangelical conference, I believe, that there was a guy, you know, very, very devout Protestant Christian who was essentially saying that we now live in a post-Christian world and have to come to grips with that. And he doesn't mean it in the sense of collaboration, but on the other side, that you know, that means that Christians have to recognize that it is unlikely that the world will return to be like that. Our society will return to be a truly Christian society in our lifetimes, and so we have to set up defenses of Christianity, sort of. And so I think that part of it is Christianity is tied in very deeply. The concepts in Christianity are tied in very deeply with Western civilization. And they're therefore tied in very deeply to the myths of Western civilization. And of course, there are pre-Christian myths in Western civilization, you know, the Greco-Roman myths and so on, and not to downplay the mythologies of Northern Europe either. But they have a very different style, right, from the post, like from the Christian period myths of Western civilization. And that there's an almost indivisible link between the elements of Christian virtue and the concepts of Christian virtue and the heroic myth as presented in Western culture, though they tie together, right? Because the Western hero from Christianity onwards is a virtuous hero, unless he's tragic, in which case he fails because of his failing of virtue, right? Because of his vice. But in either case, it is fundamentally, and that was the truth all the way up to, even the 19th century, even like Gothic horror is very fundamentally Christian at its root, right? It's about the corruption of sin versus people trying to fight against the corruption of that sin, right? The monsters always represent some kind of corruption, usually the sin of pride, right? I.e. Frankenstein, the Professor Frankenstein, or other kinds of serious elements of what Christianity sees as the corruption of sin. So in all of that context, like you could obviously, like I made an RPG called Arrows of Indra, which is based on Indian myth, right? And now there, you're not looking at a Christian worldview, but in that game, you know, like the alignments in Arrows of Indra are not lawful, chaotic, neutral. They're holy, neutral, and unholy, right? Which represents your alignment, whether you're aligned to the holy aspects of the Hindu devas, the Hindu gods, or if you are in the service of the asuras, you're an unholy, you know, the demonic influences, you're unholy. And I made sure that it would really affect the game, right? Like a lot of magic items depend on your alignment and stuff like that, right? So but in most D&D, you're still creating a culture, even if it's the Forgotten Realms or something like that, right, that has a kind of underneath it, there's this framework of Christian myth, right? Of Christian myth from Western civilization. And guys our age, you know, Gen Xers were still basically raised in a Christian world. Millennials, quite a bit less so. Gen Z, even less, right? Which is very interesting that, you know, there was just a poll that came out today that says I'm trying to remember exactly what the numbers were. Let me just quickly take a look here. Luckily, I had this down here. So the approval rating for Donald Trump among Gen Z voters is +10, right? That is insane, right? That is something that I'm stunned by, because for years the assumption of everybody in, like, you know, how do you call it, in statistical analysis of trends, assumed that every generation would be more leftward, more progressive than the previous one, because that had been the case for a very long time, right? Basically, every generation since the Great Generation has been more progressive than the previous one until now, right? And the Gen Zs are suddenly going hard to the right. And I think that is the product of this kind of desperation they have of existing in a world where so much of the aspects of Christianity in our culture have been stripped away, and they are living in a rudderless world. Right? It's the same reason that Jordan B. Peterson is popular, right? Because you have all these young men who have never been shown any of the, like, lessons of virtue that older people were, and they feel lost, you know. So, but at the same time, it means that if you haven't had that kind of experience, if you don't have that context of a Christian worldview, which everybody used to have, right? Like in 1965 or in 1975 or in 1985, you could have been born into an atheist family, right? You could have been born into an atheist family of Hindu immigrants or something like that. But if you grew up in America, you were still being infused with all of the higher end concepts of the Christian worldview in the context of Western civilization. And now you aren't. Now you're being taught this kind of meaningless relativism and hedonism, right? So I think that, like, where I would say that he might have some kind of a point is that if someone doesn't have any of the basic immersion that all of us used to have, right? Where, like, you know, most Gen Xers, even if they never set foot in a church in their life, will be able to recount a large number of Bible stories, right? Just because they was all over the place, right? And nowadays, I very much doubt that a typical Gen Zer who is not part of a religious family will be able to do that, right? So with that loss, they also will lose the underlying moral concept that exists in the D&D style heroic fantasy, which is part of the reason why in 5th edition, they're trying to turn it into, like, there was literally an article someone recently did saying it's a wonderful thing that now D&D campaigns aren't about going on quests and fighting evil. They're about slice of life adventures and about you expressing your identity, right? And that's literally what the pictures in the player handbook are doing, right? So it's saying that on the one hand, he's saying if somebody doesn't have all that background info dump of Western civilization that has now been intentionally stripped away from their education and from our popular media, they're not going to understand the heroic journey of D&D. and at the same time that D&D becomes something is going to be turned into something else than what it is because of this non-Christian worldview that the people currently writing it have. So I think that's the one place where I would really agree with Delarosa on this. I'm not sure if that's actually what he meant, or if he just meant, no, fuck you, you have to be Christian. It could be, knowing him, it might be. But that's how I would interpret it.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, if that's an interesting interpretation. I mean, I know the Pew Research surveys that I looked at my old job when I used to work under a philosopher of science who's a Jesuit priest who was the head of Gonzaga University, the president, and he kind of studied the decline among Western civilization of, young people and pulled a lot of Pew Research survey data and stuff like that. And, like it shows like a pretty, like you said, a marked decline in people who identify as quote unquote Christian or any of the other major religions in general, because they're, the agnostics are growing and the traditional religions are decreasing. I think it was, last I heard, down to 60-something%, which was a huge drop compared to what it used to be, like you said. So yeah, there's probably something to that. But I guess to get back to the tweet itself, I mean, if that, I could see that argument. Like, I agree with you, generally speaking, that we were raised a certain way and we would have been familiar with certain things. And I agree with you, having worked with these students who are, 18, 19, 20, that they are not familiar with a lot of these things. They do not know them. A lot of them do not read or read much, the way they absorb content. And so some of them have not. I've had a few college students who have not written papers in 3-4 years.
Right. I'm so glad I never went into professional academia.
Yeah, it's so I guess so I could see like that could be true. I mean, obviously I don't know. I haven't looked at this like you have, but I guess I would also, like, if I were going to start punching holes about D&D specifically, just that. The first thing that, as an argument guy, that pops to my head is just, if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm wrong, correct me, it could be, alignment, even the alignment system and stuff, actually was more of a Moorcock thing. And he certainly, if I'm not mistaken, probably was not on Team Christian. I'm not sure. I don't know the guy, but just from what I understand about the series, it's a little bit darker, grayer, grittier. So like Law of Chaos thing, I think, was a rip from him.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, and
I don't know. I was taken right out of Moorcock. Yeah.
Right. So like, I mean, D&D, just D&D, not talking about the decline of Western, which I agree. Like, Western civilization has had, I like, there was a book I read, one of the coolest books I read, kind of blew my mind because it kind of changed the way I looked at the Middle Ages, and they used to call it the Dark Ages, and most historians, I'm sure refute that kind of view of it. And the book that it's called and this was a Catholic book, disclaimer, it was How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's a really fascinating book. And it goes through every single invention that either indirectly, directly arose from either, because the church was so dominant at that time, and truly, like, it seems this guy's argument was pretty strong. Like, it was a very compelling read for me when I read it. I was like,
If I can interrupt you, one of the main concerns I have in trying to explain to people how to play Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire, right? Like, they are medieval authentic campaigns. So they are set in real places, right? In like medieval England, late medieval England, or early medieval Poland, or in Sword and Caravan's case, the Third Crusade. And one of the real issues that I have with some of the people who look at these books is that there is this assumption, this perspective in people's minds that, well, the Catholic, when we're running the game, the Catholic Church are kind of bad guys, right? Or something like that, right? Which is just completely wrong, right? Like, the reason why, like, you can see it especially in Baptism of Fire, because it's about the Christianization of Poland, right? It's about the first Polish dynasty, the Piast dynasty, that Mieszko I converts to Catholicism, and he begins to Christianize Poland. And there's huge conflicts between the Christians and the pagans in that time. But the reason that it succeeds part of the reason that it succeeds is because Christianity is from the context of the 11th century an incredibly progressive concept, right? It was a religion where everybody in the religion was not equal on earth, but equal in spirit, right? Which was not the case in, you know, in almost every form of paganism. You have this idea that, well, you know, if you're a king, or if you're a priest, or if you're a great hero, then, you know, the gods will favor you or punish you or do other things, right? Or you're going to go to like the coolest part of paradise. You're going to go to Asgard or to Elysium or wherever, right? But if you're just an ordinary person, you don't really matter that much to them, you know, like, and so like Christianity said, no, every single, you know, the poorest pauper matters as much as the highest king, right? And that was the radical killer app that allowed Christianity to succeed, right? So it's actually a tremendously important part of the overall success of Western civilization in the long run.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think from the book was explaining and there were a few others like it was talking about how even the way that I guess Christians in general looked at people was just sort of shocking, and you know, like you were mentioning, like hospitals, things like that, like where, you know, and helping others. A lot of that idea was just sort of foreign to most cultures at that time, and I always think of I guess even the story back, I guess in the Old Testament in Judaism, like which they would share with Christianity, would be like the story where Abraham has to sacrifice Isaac, you know, and everyone always kind of says, well, you know, that sounds pretty cruel to put the poor guy through that, you know, make him tell him to go up on the mountain, slaughter his own son, you know.
Yeah, but the real lesson of that story is that he doesn't, right? Because in the rest, everywhere around them, they were doing child sacrifice.
You got it, yeah.
The whole lesson is that God is the guy that says, no, you don't have to do this. Here's this other covenant, you know. I have spared you the need to do this thing, you know, like it's
and I'm going to sacrifice my own son. You know, if you want to if you go further with the Christian,
from the Christian perspective, those things are very close.
Correct. Yeah, I'm going to spare yours and send mine. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea. So I'm getting pretty tired, to be honest. I get up at 3:30 in the morning.
I know. We went over time just because of this question. So.
I'm just my brain's shutting down. I see yours lighting up, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, well, I can always in live streams I can go for hours, but I'm sorry, we have kept you over the time that we had agreed already. So I do have one final question for you. I'm sorry to the audience. I won't give you guys. Usually I give the audience a chance if they have any last questions, but because we've gone over time, my apologies. We're not gonna do that this time. But once again, before I give you this last question, everybody should check out, the link is going to be is right in the description of this live stream, the Kickstarter for the Forbidden North. Check out all of my products are linked in the description as well. Take a look. And anyone wants to do any last minute super chats, feel free to do so, and they will go to the Domino Fund. Help Domino out here. Come here. All right. So, my last question is the same. Once again, this is a question I ask every single person, right? So I'm kind of an unusual guy because I'm very big into RPGs, but I do not do almost any other of the like most standard nerd things. I don't play collectible card games. I don't play video games. I don't play like Euro board games. I don't collect Funko Pops. I don't watch anime. I don't do any of that stuff, right? So we have a contest right now, like among all the previous guests. The current reigning champion is Driving and Dragons. My question to you, because Driving and Dragons, out of the 5 guests we've had so far, is the least nerdy by far. Okay, so the question to you is, how nerdy are you? How many of those things are you into?
How many things am I into? Oh man.
Well, you've admitted you do video games. We already know that.
Yeah, we got video games. I've done board games. I like fantasy. I like sci-fi. I like Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't read any like Star Wars novels or Star Trek novels or Forgotten Realm novels. I hardly even read novels. I think they're not that great.
I like man, wow, gosh. I'm sorry, I'm so tired. I'm trying to think of everything. let's see. I mean, look at my D&D nerd. Like.
Yeah, I mean, I've got bookshelves full of RPGs. That is the one thing I've got. Right?
I read philosophy books, like some light philosophy books.
That's not nerdy. That's
pretty nerdy. I don't know.
It's nerdy, but it's not really a part of nerd culture. Most nerds like to imagine they're philosophers, but they don't really read the books. I've read a shitload of philosophy books, but that's because we're academics, so it's a different story.
Yeah. I really have no game. Like, I got really lucky. My wife just happened to say the right thing at the right time. Like, that's probably another mark against me. So I don't know. It's pretty bad. I don't know if I'm the nerdiest guy, but I started having to wear glasses. I thought I wasn't nerdy until I had to wear them, and I really felt nerdy. I got a stigmatism. It gets. I don't know, man.
All right, well, we're gonna say that it sounds to me like you're not the nerdiest guy. I had one guy who was like, yes, I do that, I do this, I've got the Funko Pops, I've got the plushie, the Cthulhu plushies, I've got everything. Right? So but you're definitely not. Apparently, Driving and Dragons continues to be the reigning champion. He is still the least nerdy guy we've had on here, and I guess on that terrible disappointment, we're gonna leave you for today, guys. Thank you everybody who has been here and for watching. And thank you very much to Rob Alderman, and I wish you ongoing luck in your Kickstarter. I'm sure it'll continue to do well. And our next episode is going. Oh, coincidentally, that's funny because it was on the 9th of February. The next one is going to be on the 9th of March. Yeah, because that's exactly 4 weeks from now. So stay tuned. I already know who my guest is going to be. It's going to be not someone as famous as Rob. It's going to be someone quite a bit less famous, actually. But I think you guys are going to find it an interesting episode nonetheless. So thank you again, Rob, and thank you to everybody watching. And currently smoking, this is a Lorenzetti egg solitario plus Argento roots. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you. And we are out of here.